Welcome to another week of thinking together about the church. Before we begin, the humor of the week is, there was a food chain that advertised 57 varieties. And I was thinking today about what entity is it that has more than 57 varieties to offer. And the answer is the church. We've got more than 57 varieties. And as I was getting ready for today, most of my reading comes from books that are given to me by other people and or referred to me by other persons. And just a couple of hours ago, one of my sources of books is Don Brewer. He came by the house and gave me 5 books in case my stack was getting low. And so I decided to take an hour and start reading because I knew about one of the books but hadn't read it. And the book is a very short book. It's entitled Anyway by Kent Keith. And he has an introduction to the book that is entitled The World is Crazy. And I'm going to read that paragraph, but I'm going to change the subject from the world to the church. So listen to this paraphrase. Yeah, the church is crazy. It doesn't make sense to you. You're right. It really doesn't make any sense. The point is not to complain about it. The point is not to give up hope, but the point is this: the church doesn't make sense. But you can make sense. You can find personal meaning. And that's what our journey is all about. Not to try to make sense out of the church, but to find personal meaning in the journey of being a part of the church. And so last Sunday, many of you participated in a very provocative dialogue as we took a couple visits to churches in any county, anywhere in the United States, and then a visit to Grace Church through the hymns we sing. And very engaging conversation, and I appreciated listening in on that. But since Sunday, Maddie and I have both read a message from a United Methodist source that we both really respect and appreciate, but it was just almost flagrant in its expression of the militant movement that we talked about last week, that indeed a war is going on with the pandemic and that there's an enemy involved in the pandemic. And it surprised both of us concerning the source and the fact that we had just talked about it on Sunday. And so as we look at last Sunday, as we think of the crazy church that we're a part of, we've decided that a good place to begin this week and explore this week together would be the foundation of the church. Now, let's remember, the question really is, what is the church? And that's what we're exploring together. The foundation of the church is our theology. Now, theology is a big word that a lot of people don't understand. It's very simple. Theos means God, and ology is the study of something. So it's the study or the science, if you will, of God. And our theology, our God thought, our God understanding is the foundation of the church. Without God, there would be no church. Now, there are 3 historical understandings of God, or I'm going to refer to as supreme beings, because it includes more than God as we understand it. One of these historical understandings is polytheism. Again, a big word, very simple. Poly means many. Theism means God. You're going to have a God of the sun, a God of the moon, a God of the stars, a God of everything. But that has never been a part of the Jewish Christian tradition. So I'm really not going to explore this with you. But the two others we are going to explore. And the second historical understanding of the supreme beings of the world is dualism, dualtheism, dual meaning two, theism meaning gods. And this is simply the understanding that there are two supreme beings in the world. We'll unpack that in a moment. The third one is monotheism, and mono means one, theism means God, and that's a belief in one God. Now, interestingly enough, both of these have been a part of the Jewish and Christian traditions. And that's sort of surprising, but that's true many years ago as well as today. And so let's look at these two historic understandings that have been a part of the Jewish and Christian tradition. First of all, let's look at dualtheism, and that is that there are two supreme beings in the cosmos, in the world. One of these is God. Recognize that really it's good with a capital G, and the other is the devil, which is really evil with a capital D, and God and the devil are at war with each other, and that's a key factor in dualism. And so God and the devil are at war with each other, and they're at war for the loyalty and control of human beings and human life. And so God, good, is seeking the loyalty and control of human beings for good, and the devil is seeking loyalty and control of human beings for evil. And human beings in this dual theism understanding, they're really not responsible for anything. You've heard the phrase, the devil made me do it. That's a caption of irresponsibility and no responsibility. And they really are not free, because God and the devil are the ones that are in control of the relationship with human beings. And so that's the essence of dual theism, believing there's a supreme being God, supreme being devil, that are at war with each other for our allegiance, our loyalty, and willingness to be under control of these supreme beings. Now, monotheism is radically different than that. And that is the belief that there's one supreme being, only one. And that is God. And God is in relationship to human beings. And God is about the purpose of love and care and truth and compassion. And God is seeking with human beings either their acceptance or rejection of love, what is good, and what God is all about. And so in this case of monotheism, the relationship is between God and human beings are responsible for what they do. They suffer the consequences of what they do, and they're free to either accept or reject, and they are not under the control of God. They want to be responsive to God and accept God. They can reflect love in the world. Or if they want to reject that, they can stand for what is not love in the world. So the difference is two supreme beings, one supreme being. The relationship between these two is war. The relationship between these two is seeking either acceptance or rejection. Now, the interesting thing about this is that both of these are represented, both dualtheism and monotheism both are part of the Hebrew library, the Old Testament, and the Christian library, the New Testament. And both are represented in both of the testaments that we refer to as the Bible. Now, the Bible, just to remind us, the root word for Bible is biblio, which means library. These books are the library of the Hebrew people, the library of the Christian community. And so the Old Testament and New Testament contain books which represent different traditions within the Jewish community. For 8 centuries, there were different traditions, and the Old Testament are writings over a period of nearly 1,000 years representing different traditions, one of which was dualism, and the other was monotheism. And within the Christian community for 3 centuries, these books were written and they were compiled to represent the traditions, plural, within the Christian community, and that included both the dualtheism and monotheism, best known for Daniel in the Old Testament, the book of Revelation in the New Testament. Were these the thoughts of all the Christian leaders or all the Jewish leaders when the testaments were put together? No, not at all. But it was one of the traditions of their faith, so therefore they're both included in the Bible. Now, whether an individual or congregation affirms dualtheism or monotheism, it makes a difference in how we relate to the world. Dualtheists, people that believe the God and the devil are at war with each other, are engaged in this cosmic battle between God and the devil, or between good and evil. They're engaged in that battle. They often lead in thought and action with judgment and fear, because that's what sets people apart when we judge each other, and that's what motivates people to make a decision of fear. And dualtheists often interpret events with the essential ingredient of the existence of an enemy, because that is their worldview, that everything in the world and every event in the world is caught up with a cause and an anti-cause, or a position with an enemy position. So that's what dualtheists are all about in the religious tradition. Monotheists are different than that. Monotheists are engaged in the journey to align themselves with God, or with good, with love and compassion. For monotheists, the journey is whether or not we're going to align ourselves with God. And monotheists often lead in thought and action with grace and forgiveness as the expression of good, as the expression of love. And finally, monotheists interpret events with the essential ingredient, not that there is an enemy, but with the ingredient of hope. And so we have 2 different traditions in the Jewish and Christian community of the foundation of the church. And that is, some believe that there are 2 supreme beings, God and the devil. Others believe there is simply one. And that is the foundation of many of the varieties of the church which exist. And so on the basis of exploring the foundation of the church being God, here are some questions that we might think about this week. In the 4 churches we visited last week, if you were part of that, the church that's the gateway to salvation, the church that is the community of servanthood, the church that is the connected community with each other, and the church that is the militant movement in our world and in society. In these 4 churches we visited, which are the most likely to be founded on dualtheism or monotheism? You see, it makes a difference what your belief about God is in terms of what your thoughts are about the church. Another question, what is the attraction of dualtheism that Maddie and I experienced just this week in the context of the 2020 pandemic? Why all of a sudden is this surfacing, and what is attractive about that? The other question, obviously, is what is the attraction of monotheism in the context of our pandemic today? And which is more powerful in your experience, not only in your own life, but as you observe others, in your family, among friends, or among society in general? Which is more powerful, fear or compassion? There's a difference between the two. And finally, I want to share with you something that I learned from the Indian community, the indigenous community, and that I had the privilege of working with for 8 years. And they are monotheists. They call their supreme being the Great Spirit. And there's no opposing Great Spirit to their Great Spirit. They are monotheists. Their understanding is that life is tragedy, period, including death. Life is tragedy. The only decision we have is how we will cope with that tragedy, with or without the Great Spirit at our side. So as we think about the pandemic, as we think about the virus, as we think about all of our responses to that, I would just challenge you to think about this understanding. Does it make sense to you? The indigenous community believing in the Great Spirit, that life is tragedy, and our only decision is whether or not we're going to cope with that tragedy with the Great Spirit at our side. Maybe these questions will occupy your time between now and Sunday, and I look forward to our discussion then.